Talisman Legendary Tales. This is a game that was released at Gen Con 2018. It is based on the classic Talisman franchise. Very important game, the original Talisman. Yes, it was simple, even simplistic, but it did introduce hundreds of thousands of people to the joy of fantasy adventuring in a more manageable format than the role-playing games that were available at the time when Talisman came out. Talisman is back. Or is it? Because really, Talisman Legendary Tales, with the exception of the name, the logo, some game pieces that look like talismans, some classic characters which have now been redrawn in a more family-friendly format. Aside from these things, the game is completely different. Mechanically speaking, totally different. You have a modular board, you have a cooperative engine, players working together to complete missions. You have different missions, and you have, well, you will see bags. So very, very, very different game. Basically, what you have here, it's a cooperative fantasy game for children and families. I played the game with my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old, and they really, really like it. So this is what you can expect. Now, modular board, the play area will be formed by using these hexagonal tiles here that will be placed on the board in different configurations based on the mission that you're playing. You should play the missions in order, but if you don't, I mean, who is going to complain? It's your game, you paid for it, you should do whatever you want with it. Ideally, you play them in order, you conquer talismans with a number of stars, and you need to accrue enough stars to unlock the following scenario. Just for fun here, I set up the fourth scenario here, the fourth adventure, A Plague of Toads. So you set up the board based on those instructions, creating the map as described on the rulebook, placing these encounter tokens face down into different sets of encounter tokens for each adventure. Each adventure also has a mat such as this one. You place a turn token on it, and the space in which you place it depends on the number of stars that you're trying to get. So that simply means that if you're going for more stars in a single game, you will have less time to complete the adventure. If you are able to complete the objectives of the adventure before the time runs out, then you get a talisman with the corresponding number of stars. If you fail to do so, if time runs out, you lose the game, which is pretty much the only way, or the main way in which you lose the game, which is nice. People don't get killed, so that's not just nicer when you're playing with kids, but also everybody's involved in the game at all times because nobody gets kicked out, which is one of the problems, of course, of the original Talisman. You kick out players, and that's not good. Now, each adventure will tell you what happens, and each adventure is divided in chapters. My kids love it. It's the first time in which they play a game that is a quote-unquote mini legacy game. We do something, then they discover something more about the adventure, the objectives change, then something more is discovered. So you will go through the different sections of an adventure, completing the tasks that you have to, and then you will flip it to the other side, in which, again, you will move the time token to the space corresponding to where it was on the other side. And again, you do different things to complete the mission. My kids had never played a scenario-based game before, let alone one in which each scenario has different chapters. Each player will use a character. Characters come in male and female versions of themselves, which is just the right thing to do. Each game should have that option. Each character is represented by a standee on the board and by a bag in which you will place tiles representing the actions. These are the bags that come with the game, and I'm gonna complain about them quite a bit for various reasons. Well, the nice thing, each bag will have a tag telling you what the character that uses that bag is, which is the character who uses that bag, the tokens that go in there at the beginning of the game, plus either abilities. But you have this huge bag, and these are the tokens the tokens that go in it. As you can see, you don't really need a bag this big, which wouldn't be much of a problem if it wasn't for the fact that once you punch the game and you sort the components, there's just no way for you to put everything back in the box. The bags with the components just don't fit. So what we've been doing, because this is pretty much all that you need, we've been repurposing bags from other games. This is the bag from Spirits of the Wild. This is a bag for, I don't even remember where. We're just hanging around laying around my game room. Oh, by the way, this is the bag that you use for treasures. You will place treasure tokens here. And yeah, you need a slightly bigger bag because you have quite a number of treasure tokens here. But really, this is all that you need. And as we find other games with other bags, we'll simply be using other bags. Again, this is a bag from another game, and this is all that you need. Also, these bags are kind of like, quote-unquote, falling apart. They're just losing a lot of lint, a lot of little threads. So I've been complaining quite a while about them, and as I promised that I would. Also, you have a die, which is a custom die. Now, what happens during your turn? When it is your turn, players alternate taking turns. When it is your turn, you roll the die. You always do, even if you don't want to move. The number that you roll is the number of spaces up to which you can move. If you roll the symbol here, you also move the time marker by 1. Pretty self-explanatory. If you roll the magic portal, you can teleport to anywhere on the board. And so you simply move on the board, and then if you enter a space with a face-up encounter token, you have to encounter it. Otherwise, the rules are kind of unclear what happens if you move to a space with a face-down. The way we've been playing it is that you can move through a face-down encounter, and then you can choose, of course, to reveal encounters, but in which case you have to encounter what's there. Basically, you need to complete the challenge. You need to produce icons that will match the icons of the encounters that you have there. So you will draw tokens from your bag. That is the warrior. And where is the bag of the warrior? Here it is. Again, remade. When you have an encounter, you will draw 3 tokens from your bag, and then you will use the icons that have been produced. In this case, for example, I have a magic hat, which is magic. The sword is like melee, or well, just swords. Basically, you need to produce magic hats and swords to pass challenges. If you draw the symbol, it's bad because time passes, and then you simply move the time token on the turn track. This symbol lets you draw tokens from other people's bags. And then we have swords, that's it. This lets you draw another token from your own bag if you so desire. Suppose that after all is said and done, these are the tokens that I drew. Now I have 1 magic hat and 2 swords. I would be able, for example, to defeat either this one or this one, not both, because I do not have 2 magic hats. And so, for example, I decided to defeat this one. When you defeat an enemy, you remove that from the board and you draw a treasure tokens from the treasure bag, and then you can add it to your bag or to someone else's bag. Now, interesting is that after you draw your 3 tokens or more, if you have changed them because of game effects, the tokens stay there. They stay there in front of you. You can choose when you want to put them back before you had to draw, but when you put them back, you have to put them all back. So there's a little bit of manipulation of the pace of the game here, because if a lot of your time tokens are out, maybe you want to make do with whatever is left in your bag without replenishing it, because this means that you can draw from your bag without the worry that you are drawing these things. As the game progresses and you acquire treasures, You get more icons, you get to do more things, you get to cancel time symbols, you get, of course, to produce multiple symbols at the same time, you get to turn time back on the time track, and so different combinations of these good things. Extra symbols, extra drawing of tokens, removing or annulling time tokens, or moving the time token back. This is the general idea. As far as I understand, if you fail to complete this, to defeat an encounter, nothing happens. It's just that you don't get the treasure. Maybe you wasted time. Maybe you did not remove an obstacle, so other people don't want to move through it. They still have to stop and encounter that. But this is the basic idea. Move around, draw tokens from your bag, acquire new tokens, try to complete, to defeat encounters, and most importantly, try to complete all of the tasks that you had to complete to be able to finish the adventure. And this is how you play Talisman Legendary Tales. So, Talisman Legendary Tales. I've seen people online complaining that this game is so simple, so linear that a 6-year-old could play it. Well, I have a 6-year-old, so to me that is not a minus, but they are accurate. Well, the fact that I can play with my 8 and my 6-year-old daughters shows that they are accurate. And you know what? In a sense, they're also right to complain if they read on the box that in fact the game is 14 years and up. 14 and up? That's like Advanced Squad Leader plus with some really unsavory adult themes, I guess. I don't know who came up with that rating. So I'm afraid that this game may end up being misjudged, may end up getting in the hands of the people that are not the ones that are the intended audience. They will not like it, and the people that will like it may neglect it, may overlook it. So just to clarify, this is a game for children, this is a game for families. Yes, it is a game for 6-7-year-old kids and their parents. Even if you have a casual groups of only adults, this game may be too light. I would not recommend it for adult groups. Again, unless they're incredibly casual. I think the game works better if it's played mainly by children or adults with children when children are in the room. And maybe the kind of like nice, cute, colorful art should already be a signal to that idea. But again, when you see 14 plus and you have played as an adult the old Talisman, I also see how the misunderstanding that this could be a hobby game in the traditional sense. I see how that misunderstanding can happen. Now, as a game mainly for children, as a game for families, this is a fun one. Is not particularly deep, is not very subtle, and it is true that it's very decision light. You need to accomplish certain tasks and you go to a place and you look at the encounter token and you draw 3 tokens. Then you may have some decisions. Maybe you can choose whether to draw more tokens or not. Before you draw, you can choose if you want to put the stuff back in your bag. But very often these are very light, fairly obvious in most cases. This being said, is that bad? Well, first, to start with, these light, simple decisions are more decisions that you had in traditional Talisman, in which very often is you roll a die and see what happens. You don't even get to play with modifiers to choose whether you want to roll more or invest more or reset a certain pool of resources. In Talisman, very often you're choosing whether you want to go to 2 locations. When you roll a die, you have a choice of 2 locations, but they're perfectly identical. They're functionally identical. Here, the board is more interesting than the board of the old Talisman. Most importantly, this game is quote-unquote a legacy game for children, but not legacy in the sense that you're going to destroy components. But in any case, it has that idea of campaigning, of interlocked sections of a story that unlock one after the other, a narrative that unravels as you play. Hey, so well, first the adventures should be played as a campaign, so you're looking for all these talismans, but most interesting, within each adventure you had the different chapters. First, I don't know, you're looking for herbs for an alchemist, and then the alchemist, after making the potions, tells you how to use it. Then you need to travel to a location to use it, something else is discovered, etc, etc, etc. Now, we have been playing games like Castle Ravenloft or Pandemic Legacy, etc, etc, we adults. To us, this has become almost the norm. There is such strong interest for narrative in games these days that we have a lot of games that fall in that category. But my kids have never seen anything like that. To them, it was like their eyes were so big. Wait a second, a game divided in chapters, a game where stuff changes as you go and you discover new stuff. To them, that was, well, game changes, was as amazing to them as it was for us adults when we saw Risk Legacy and we could barely wrap our mind around, like, wait a second, what do you mean that there's new stuff to be discovered? It's a game, or is it a book? I don't know. So this is a game that 20 years, 30 years from now, if I'm still around, I'll remember fondly, because it is the game that showed to my daughters the joys of campaign gaming, shows to my daughters the idea that games can tell stories. If nothing else, this game is going to be important in my collection, or in any case in my family history. Again, if you're playing it after Pandemic Legacy or Castle Ravenloft and you're hoping, oh, another adventure campaign game, then drawing 3 tokens from a bag and seeing, oh well, read another paragraph after the other in which you bring the potion to a person rather than another, that probably will be anticlimactic. So know what's in the box, the experience that you have to, the game can offer, and I think you'll be fine. You'll know if you should avoid it or if it isn't going to be a game-changing game for your family too. This being said, more in general, again, as a children game that introduces campaign gaming to children, the game is impeccable. It does exactly what this kind of idea should do. The rules are simple, they're very intuitive. Draw a bag and see what the tokens are. So intuitive. It has the modicum of decision that gives kids the illusion that they are making more decisions and more impactful decisions than they indeed are. So in that sense, it's perfectly fine. The modular board, that is fun. Again, from the point of view of the production, there are a couple of minor things here and there. The bags are useless, worse than useless. You can't fit them in the box. So again, worse than useless because you had to replace them. Minor things in any case, because the game remains very playable for families or for children, not, I would say, for adults that don't have children running around and willing to play games. Definitely not for hobby gamers. It's very light, probably too light for most adults, but for children it is just right, and it offers a style of gameplay that at least personally hadn't seen in children's games before, and for this reason alone, Talisman Legendary Tales is a pretty impressive game for me, for my family, for my specific situation, and I'm sure for some of you out there too, but definitely not for everybody.